Welcome back. California was pushing a ban aimed squarely at the most popular pistol in America, the Glock, and the legislature passed it. They did it last week, and now it's on Gavin Newsom's desk. And it isn't alone. Lawmakers also sent over background checks for, of all things, barrels, a purchase rationing reboot, and a crackdown on DIY files and machines. I'm going to unpack each bill, explain how they work, when they take effect, and why they are begging for a court fight under Heller and Bruin. Share this and subscribe so you don't miss the next breakdown. Let's start with the Glock ban AB 1127. It prohibits licensed dealers from selling what the state calls machine gun convertible pistols, meaning any semi-automatic pistol with a cruciform trigger bar. It's not just Glock that uses that design. It reaches offshoots, build kits, and companies that make Glock pattern pistols. The theory is simple. Drop in a tiny backplate device, the so-called Glock switch, and the pistol can be readily converted to fire automatically. No extra machining on the trigger guard is required, so regulators claim conversion is readily achievable, and that becomes the springboard for a dealer sale prohibition. Rather than punish criminal misuse, the bill targets the design itself. AB 1127 also folds a pistol equipped with such a device into the state definition of a machine gun. Pair a pistol with a backplate switch, and by statute, it becomes a machine gun. As usual, there are exemptions for law enforcement and other official uses, but there isn't an exemption for you. The people actually covered by the Second Amendment. Which guns get hit? The definition targets many Glock models and clones because of the trigger bar design, sweeping in a huge class of common handguns carried by civilians and police across America. When would this bite should Gavin Newsom sign AB 1127 into law? A Senate analysis lists January 1, 2026 as the start date. Advocacy and press coverage have also referenced July 1, 2026 in later stages. Bottom line, the prohibition on dealer sales of covered pistols is slated for 2026. If you're in California, whether you're an FFL or a buyer, watch the final enrolled text once the governor signs, and watch Department of Justice guidance when the operative date kicks in. That's where definitions and gotchas tend to surface, and that's where people get burned. Gun control groups say manufacturers who fix the design can simply resume sales. In reality, California's handgun roster hurdles. Micro-stamping mandates tied up in litigation and other mandated safety features mean just fix it isn't simple for Glock models actually on the market. Once a pistol drops off that roster, getting it back on is a fight. The roster has been a one-way ratchet for years. Anyone who has watched the model list shrink understands that perfectly. So the notion that a quick trigger bar tweak magically clears the way back to store shelves is more talking point than real-world pathway. Expect litigation the moment ink is dry. Heller protects handguns in common use for lawful purposes. A design-based prohibition that effectively sweeps in Glock pattern pistols looks like a categorical handgun ban by proxy. Bruin's history and tradition test does not bless modern design bans because a tiny device exists on the black market. AB 1127 is pitched as the anti-switch fix, functionally. It is a brand and design-based handgun sale ban that strikes at arms in common use. This bill walks up to that line and dares the judiciary to do its job. Meanwhile, the real-world effects land on the people who follow the rules. Dealers face another compliance minefield, parsing trigger bar geometry and SKU sprawl against vague, shifting guidance. You think criminals running illegal switches are going to wait patiently for a background check? They aren't standing in FFL lines. The burden lands on the law-abiding as the bad actors carry on. The state insists it is narrowly targeting a conversion pathway. In practice, it is kneecapping a platform millions rely on for defense while carving out special lanes for officialdom. Stick with me, because AB 1127 is only the first chapter. Next is the bill that tries to put background checks on barrels. Yes, the tube. And then a rationing reboot that swaps 1 in 30 for 3 in 30 while piling on concealed carry red tape. I'm going to show how they interlock, when each date hits, and why the state keeps inching from regulating guns to regulating ownership itself, and now even parts and information. Share this with people who need the details, and make sure you're subscribed for the next breakdown. Now let's talk about the barrel bill. SB 704. Yes, a background check for a tube. The measure pulls standalone barrels into the controlled pipeline for firearms. Sales or transfers must occur through a licensed dealer and require an eligibility check plus record keeping. Dealers may charge up to $5 per check, and the department can index that fee by $1 a year. There are exemptions if the barrel is attached to a complete firearm, if the buyer is law enforcement or military, if the purchaser qualifies as a curious and relics collector, or if the barrel is bought in the same transaction as a firearm so the regular background check covers it. Otherwise, the tube triggers paperwork, fees, and a file. Supporters call SB 704 a first-of-its-kind response to so-called ghost guns. They insist the barrel is the component that cannot be easily 3D printed, so if they choke the supply, the home-built problem dissolves. Crime evaporates. Poof! In reality, California already criminalized unserialized frames, receivers, and precursor parts. This bill adds new crimes and new friction for people who follow the rules while illicit markets shrug. It is regulatory creep from guns to gun parts. Want to replace a worn barrel or buy an aftermarket tube? Go to an FFL, appear in person, do the paperwork, pay the fee, and wait. The part is not a frame or a receiver, yet the state treats it like a tracked object. When does SB 704 actually bite? The staggered implementation fully kicks in on July 1, 2027 under the current amended text. Earlier drafts floated 2026 or January 2027. So, as always, watch the final enrolled language once the governor signs and keep an eye on Department of Justice regulations as they roll out. That is where definitions get stretched, fees ratchet up, and dealers learn the hard way that a tube is now paperwork. The item that once arrived at your doorstep becomes a counter-transaction with a state file number attached. Make no mistake, the intent is to be first in the nation so other states follow. If California can rebrand a tube as a tracked item with eligibility gates, committees elsewhere will copy and paste the playbook. Meanwhile, criminals will ignore it like they ignore everything else, and the burden lands on the compliant. Now the rationing reboot AB 1078. You remember when a federal court smacked down the state's 1 in 30 rule. Sacramento's answer is to try 3 in 30. AB 1078 says that starting April 1, 2026, a person may purchase up to 3 firearms within any rolling 30-day window. Dealers are barred from delivering if the buyer would exceed that cap. It is transparently a litigation dodge. Okay, not 1 in 30. How about 3 in 30? Changing the integer does not change the constitutional problem. The cadence of purchases is not a founding-era tradition, and rationing does not become legitimate because the ration is slightly larger. Practically, it throttles ordinary buyers while forcing dealers into yet another layer of gatekeeping and error risk. Buy a pistol on day 1. A rifle on day 10, a shotgun on day 29, and you are done until the window resets. If a shipment slips a day, the calendar punishes you, not the state. Meanwhile, bad actors bypass the system entirely, so the ration lands on the law-abiding while the headlines brag about a new safeguard. Bruin still applies. AB 1078 also tinkers with carry licensing. It tightens disqualifiers, directs what agencies must check and how they must check it, and lays process rules for non-resident applicants. There is language clarifying transport on public transit. The firearm must be unloaded and locked in a container. You cannot carry it on your person through the system where the creeps and the cuckoos ride. If you must cross that space, it is boxed, unloaded, locked away. The package is pitched as a fix-it bill shoring up the post-brew and carry scheme, but in practice it piles administrative burdens on people who comply, not on criminals who do not. What does any of this do to stop a single criminal from carrying as they want? Nothing. People who intend to break the law do not count calendar days or study transport clauses. They just carry status-wise. AB 1078 is enrolled and headed to the governor, and immediate challenges are coming once it is signed, especially against the rationing section. A court already told the state purchase cadence games do not pass muster. Changing the number does not conjure a tradition. Now we get to AB 1263, the bill that tries to criminalize helping other people build what the state calls unlawful firearms. It creates a new misdemeanor for knowingly or willfully causing or facilitating the unlawful manufacture of firearms, including so-called assault weapons and 50 BMG. And it explicitly calls out using a 3D printer or a CNC machine to do it. Then it enlarges the target by expanding what counts as digital firearm manufacturing code. Not just a simple CAD file, but any SAD or CAM data that can drive a machine to make a component. It even builds a rebuttable presumption of liability if you run a site that hosts this code and encourages people to share it. And the reach is not limited by borders. If your website is accessible in California, they want to reach you from California, the way other states already tried with parts retailers. That is how you turn a state statute into a national speech filter. It gets wider still. AB 1263 also requires sellers of unattached barrels and sellers of so-called firearm manufacturing machines to post clear notices about California crimes and to verify that buyers are 18 or older. Yes, the barrel again. The tube keeps returning because the state wants every tube and tool and text inside a gated corridor. The pattern is obvious: turn parts into paperwork, turn downloads into liabilities, and call it safety. This measure cleared both chambers and is sitting on the governor's desk. When it is signed, expect First Amendment challenges on code as speech, dormant Commerce Clause challenges on the attempt to police out-of-state websites, and the inevitable Bruin claims. Because regulating components and information is not part of the historical tradition they are supposed to satisfy. Heller protects handguns in common use for lawful purposes. Bruin demands a historical analog, not modern fear of a backplate or a file. There is no founding-era tradition of background checks for barrels, purchase rationing by calendar math, or punishing code because someone might print a part. These bills burden the rule follower and miss the criminal. So act. Contact the governor and tell him to veto AB 1127, SB 704, AB 1078, and AB 1263. Be respectful, be firm, and do not get yourself red flagged. Support the lawsuits that are coming. The California Rifle and Pistol Association, Gun Owners of America, Firearms Policy Coalition, and the Second Amendment Foundation will move, and Gun Owners of California will be in the fight. Pick the organization you trust and help fund the casework. Share this, subscribe, and stay alert. I will track every signature, filing, and injunction, and I will break down each step so you are ready when the next date hits. Stay safe, stay vigilant, and carry lawfully to protect yourself, your friends, your family, and your community. The state keeps proving it will not do that job for you. And remember, code is speech. Tools are tools. The Constitution does not evaporate because a file can guide a machine.